Over the past week, I've been ranking the top 10 quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs heading into the 2020 college football season. I've already ranked my quarterbacks and running backs, so it's time to talk about my top 10 wide receivers. These are who I think are going to be the 10 best wide receivers in 2020, but they're also who I'm most excited to see this upcoming year. Just like the previous two lists, there are a lot of good names to include, so it was really difficult making this top 10. I think the wide receivers list was actually the most difficult to make. Before I get to my list, make sure to subscribe if you love college football and turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. Now before I get to my top 10, here are some of my honorable mentions, and it's a pretty big list. George Pickens was one of the best freshman wide receivers in the SEC last season, and maybe one of the best freshman wideouts in all of college football. He caught 49 passes for 700 yards and 8 touchdowns. This year, he'll likely experience a lot more volume, and he gets transfer quarterback Jamie Newman. Though he only played in 9 games last year, Sage Surratt still surpassed 1,000 yards in 2019. He caught 66 passes and had 11 touchdowns. If he's able to play a full 12-game schedule in 2020, he very easily can find himself atop the leaderboards for yards and touchdowns in 2020. Entering his third season with the Trojans, Aman-Ra St. Brown is poised for a breakout season. Arguably one of the best wideouts in the Pac-12, Brown and his quarterback Kedon Slovis make up one of the best quarterback-wide receiver duos in the country. He finished last season with over 1,000 yards on 77 catches, and there's no reason for him not to improve on those numbers in 2020. With only 6 touchdowns last season, I think it's safe to assume Aman-Ra St. Brown will reach double digits this upcoming year. One of the biggest wide receivers on this list, Warren Jackson, stands at 6'6". He enters his senior season where he looks to build off a very solid 2019 campaign. Last year, Jackson caught 77 passes for over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Kicking off our countdown is Tutu Atwell. Though he's only 5'9" and about 150 pounds, Atwell is one of the most electric wide receivers in the nation. In 2019, he caught 69 passes for 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns. According to Pro Football Focus, he was the third highest rated player wide receiver in 2019 with a 91.7 receiving grade. With an improved Louisville roster, look for Atwell to be an even bigger focal point in 2020. Now, it's awesome when you have a really good quarterback to make your job a whole lot easier, and that's the case for Dazz Newsome in 2020. He enters his senior season and is coming off by far the best year of his career. He caught 72 passes for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2019. Newsome very well might be the second best wide receiver in the ACC and could find himself finishing as the overall best when the season's over. Now, a lot of people remember Chris Olave from how the Fiesta Bowl ended this past year, but don't let that distract you from the great season he had. He had over 800 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns last year with Justyn Fields, and him and Fields both returned to an already stacked Buckeyes offense. As the clear-cut #1 target for Fields this upcoming year, expect Olave's production to see a huge increase. Tylan Wallace could have entered the NFL draft, but he opted to return for his senior season. He was a Biletnikoff Award finalist in 2018, but injuries cost him 4 games in 2020. Last season in limited time, Wallace caught 53 passes for 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, which was still a very productive year. If Wallace is able to play a full season in 2020, he may replicate his 2018 numbers of 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns, and may even surpass them. Alabama is officially known as Wide Receiver University, and deservingly so. They've had a number of great wideouts over the years, and this year they have some more. The first name we're going to talk about today is Jaylen Waddle. Over his first 2 seasons at Alabama, Waddle has caught 78 passes for 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's also had 900 yards and 3 touchdowns in the return game. Though he may not be the best overall wide receiver at Bama, he's definitely the most electrifying. Although it seems like he's been here for a while, Justyn Ross is only entering his junior season with Clemson. Ross has been one of the more productive wide receivers in college football over the last 2 years. Since 2018, Ross has 112 catches for 1,900 yards and 17 touchdowns. With T. Higgins gone, Ross becomes the new #1 weapon for Trevor Lawrence in 2020. This may be Ross's final year with the Tigers, so expect him to try and go out with a bang. In case you forgot about him, Rondale Moore still exists. After being arguably the most exciting player in the country as a freshman in 2018, Moore missed majority of 2019 with injuries. If you need a reminder, he caught over 110 passes for nearly 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2018. He also added 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground and 700 yards in the return game. If Moore can remain healthy this year, expect to see his name as a potential Heisman candidate throughout the season. We talked about an Alabama wide receiver earlier, and now it's time to discuss another. DeVonta Smith returns for his senior season and is coming off a great great 2019 in which he caught 68 passes for nearly 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. He also did all that while essentially being the number 3 target for the Tide. Now, he likely moves into that number 1 spot, so expect another huge year for DeVonta Smith. The best wide receiver from the Big Ten returns for his junior season, and Rashod Bateman is ready for another breakout year. In 2019, Bateman caught 60 passes for 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. With Tanner Morgan back at quarterback for the Gophers, Bateman is destined for another great season. He'll be the leader of that offense and will look to help his team make another push at reaching the Big Ten title game. The easiest spot on this list, Ja'Marr Chase comes in at number 1. Last season, as only a sophomore, Chase caught 84 passes for 1,800 yards and 20 touchdowns, winning the Biletnikoff Award. He very well could have been the best wide receiver in college football last year, but he's easily the best for 2020. Now, it will be interesting to see how his production fares with the loss of Joe Burrow, but I think Ja'Marr Chase will be just fine. Well, that wraps up my list for the top 10 wide receivers for the 2020 season. Do you guys agree with my list? Leave a comment below with your top 3, 5, top 10, top 20, however many you want to list, your top receivers heading into the 2020 season. Also, let me know if there's any players I didn't include that you think are worthy of being on the top 10 list. Make sure you guys check out my videos of my top 10 quarterbacks and my top 10 running backs as well. As I mentioned, make sure you subscribe if you love college football. Lots of great college football content coming over the next few months. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.